I saw the breakdown on the shoulder of the highway, and over up to see if my help was needed. As I stepped out of my vehicle and walked around to the front of the other car, it was obvious that the problem was both unfortunate and embarrassing. Unbelted pants sagged as an obese man bent under the hood, revealing a crescent moon's worth of bulging, hairy flesh. Frayed pant cuffs piled around clownish feet clad in cheap shoes, worn soles visible as their owner stood on tiptoes for a better view. This disastrous scene dragged on fruitlessly as the man shifted around, completely clueless and unwilling to admit it. His obvious fear of failing a stereotypically masculine task was pathetic, as if self-worth should be based on knowledge of basic mechanics. Satisfied with my examination, I spoke. "Need some help there?" The buffoon shot up and banged his head against the hood before pulling out. I was impressed by the sheer girth that retracted, half expecting his threadbare, too tight t-shirt to be completely covered in grease from pressing against the inner workings. The wail of a man rubbed a head full of greasy black hair, and his face was bright pink with nervousness and slick with sweat as he turned toward me. His tiny, deep-set eyes made him look like the unfortunate offspring of a rat and a pig, and the enormous nose, bulging jowls and pockmarked cheeks did not help his appearance. "No, I got this," the man said, refusing to meet my eyes. I'd heard more confidence from children caught with a hand in the cookie jar. "Thanks anyway." I smiled wanly. My new friend obviously thought admitting he was stumped would make him less of a man. Granted, he was about to be made less of a man, but certainly not because of his lack of automotive knowledge. I was simply taking it upon myself to beautify the nation's highways. "Look, you obviously don't have any tools," I said as the man winced and deflated further, "so just let me grab my stuff. It'll just take a moment, and you can go from there." He grimaced and nodded solemnly, and I headed to the back of my car to pop the trunk. She was a beater, approaching her third decade of service, but I kept her in good shape. I reckoned she was in better shape than my friend's mid-tier sedan, likely chosen for less for its features and more because it was the most expensive sale the dealer could wring out of him. I imagined he'd be eager to trade it in soon enough. A proper car enthusiast could easily find something to better fit their needs. I fished around for a leather bag, then shut the trunk and headed back. My friend was staring at his own car in pure misery. He turned to me, and I wordlessly held out the bag for his perusal. "Thanks," he said, attempting a smile as he took my offering. He put the bag down and stared at it hopelessly for a few seconds. He looked back at his open hood, then down at the bag, then back at the car, then at me, then blinked a few times, then he finally bent down to catalog the bag's contents. All that weight had to be hell on his knees, so I gave him a little assistance to hurry him on his way. "Don't know why I don't carry something like this in the trunk," he said with something approaching confidence. "A few bucks worth of tools would save a lot of trouble in the long run." The man finished his inspection, nodded in satisfaction, then slowly stood and returned under the hood for another look. This time, the view was quite enjoyable. As my friend's torso went horizontal, the top of a shapely ass and its accompanying black thong summited his low-rise jeans. Full thighs tapered to perfectly turned calves under tight denim, ending in small feet proportionally sized to the legs above, if not the gut. A lesser man might have felt like a pervert, staring at that right bottom unnoticed, but I considered myself an artist admiring his latest work. He once again stood on his toes for a better look, and the stress on his feet was relieved as heels grew down from the back of his sneakers, which turned white as their fronts opened up. Those incredible legs, long enough to make any woman jealous, looked even better as his weight shifted and they began showing off their trim but solid muscle. With a sigh, the man pulled back out and turned around. His torso had shrunk considerably to accommodate his new lower half, but it was still fairly obese, very male, and completely out of place. The outline of his manhood stood in contrast to his womanly hips, and I didn't want to consider the amount of pinching and chafing he probably felt in those pants. "This is completely stupid, but I think I just ran out of coolant," he said, grinning at the absurdity. There's probably something more to it, but I'm just gonna refill it and get it to the nearest shop for a better look. Mind if I borrow from your kit? By all means, I said. Before you do, though, can I take a look with you? A second opinion never hurt. Yeah, sure, okay. I guess if you can catch the real problem it'll save me some time later. He was obviously hesitant, but didn't call me out for second-guessing him. He still lacked the confidence to stand by his prognosis. The man budged over a bit and I took a spot next to him. I bumped against a thick, hairy arm that responded by becoming thin and smooth, and as my friend's torso and shoulders narrowed to girlish proportions I had substantially more space to work with. Nothing I can catch at a glance, he said as I looked around the machinery. The way his now too large shirt hung loose was irritating, but that stopped mattering as shrunk into tank top, two somethings weighing it down at chest level as it shortened to reveal a flat stomach and concave waist. It was becoming hard to scout for potential problems rather than admire the ones I'd just solved. Nothing I can see either, I said, retreating from the car. After another second searching, my friend followed suit with a dissatisfied grunt, running his hands through and shaking out long, straight, rust-colored hair as he stood. Just hope you haven't sprung a leak. He grimaced and nodded in agreement, looking patently absurd with his piggy face above a model's body and under fabulous hair, until his lips grew full and cherry red, his nose shrank to something upturned and far more appealing, his jowls dissipated to reveal flawless cheeks, and his beady eyes pushed forward as they grew big and black and intriguing. The way he still shyly avoided a direct gaze gave his newfound beauty a powerful innocence. For a moment his pretty eyes widened, then they closed and those kissable lips formed a perfect O as one last, admittedly drastic, pair of adjustments took place above and below. When her eyes reopened, my very new friend took a moment to steady herself before speaking. Well, guess I'll fill it up a bit, look up the nearest garage and go from there, she said, her voice light, melodic and meek as ever. Thanks for stopping. Hope I didn't waste too much of your time. Nonsense, I said. Happy to help. She blushed and looked at the ground, squirming uncomfortably. Rather than acknowledge my slight kindness, she reached down for the coolant and a funnel, then leaned back under the hood to get to work. When she was done she grabbed my bag, put the stuff back and stood around uncomfortably, brushing hair out of her face and looking everywhere but at me, no doubt agonizing over how she should say goodbye. I'm usually not one for mental gymnastics beyond the basics, but seeing such a profound success acting so milquetoast was a waste of potential. A moment later my friend gazed at me with confidence and adjusted her posture so her back was straighter and her chest pushed a bit forward, while the corners of her lips curled into a sly smile. I find going full bimbo distasteful, but adding a sense of adventure and a dash of flirtatiousness to an existing personality goes a long way. Gotta say, you're amazingly generous to let a pretty girl use your stuff, she said, eyes sparkling as she held out my bag. Her voice was unchanged, but the tone was playful and far more alive. But seriously, thanks for the help. She leaned in for a hug. The softness of her chest was spellbinding, as was the brief wetness on my cheek. If you're dropping that thing off, you need a ride back? I asked as she pulled away. Don't know how far you are from home, but I'm not in any rush. Appreciate the offer, but I'll be fine, she said. I'd feel more comfortable riding with a friend, and if worse comes to worse I can always call a cab. You've done more than enough. Fair enough. Drive safe. This was a job well done, enough that I was only slightly disappointed by her rejection. I watched my friend tantalizingly close the hood, climb in her car, and drive off to her new destiny. A few years later I caught her on the cover of an automotive magazine, leaning against the hood of a Jaguar and doing a tremendous job of not wearing many clothes. The inside story was a cheesecake puff piece about the novelty of her being just as comfortable working on cars as she was posing with them. A bit contrary to the message I would have hoped to spread, but at least my assistance hadn't gone to waste.